When billionaire Clifford Kennedy arrogantly slapped Thunder Ray, the prize stallion of the Sweetwater auction, he expected laughter, not silence. But what followed wasn't rage or panic, it was recognition. One quiet glance between horse and man unraveled secrets long buried, and set into motion events that would rewrite history, awaken ghosts of the past, and forever alter two lives bound by betrayal, redemption, and an unbreakable bond. Dust rose from the dirt floor of the Sweetwater auction arena, drifting lazily in the Texas heat. Cameras flashed, murmurs rippled, anticipation sharpened. At the center stood Thunder Ray, a stallion whose muscular frame glistened like polished mahogany beneath the relentless sun. He wasn't just a horse, he was a legend in flesh, heritage etched in every graceful shift of his powerful legs. Clifford Kennedy, billionaire oil magnate, with a reputation larger than his fortune, swaggered toward the stallion. His polished boots gleamed arrogantly, mirroring his spotless white shirt. Clifford wasn't there for horses, he was there for applause, for power, for the thrill of owning what others coveted. As eyes turned toward him, he smiled broadly, relishing the attention. "Watch this," he drawled loudly, theatrically raising his hand and smacking Thunder Ray's gleaming neck. Not enough to wound, just enough to provoke. The slap echoed sharply across the arena, cutting conversations like a gunshot. Instantly, silence claimed the stands. Ranchers who'd laughed moments earlier grew stone-faced. Buyers froze mid-conversation, disbelief etched across their features. Winona Hale, the seasoned facility manager, gripped the railing, mouth parted in shock. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Yet Thunder Ray didn't flinch, didn't rear, didn't bolt. Instead, the stallion turned his head slowly, deliberately, and fixed Clifford with eyes that spoke louder than fury ever could. Calm, calculated, ancient. Thunder Ray's stare pinned Clifford to the spot, draining the billionaire's arrogant grin into an uncertain smirk. Hidden near the side gates, Jethro Kane watched silently. A faded denim jacket hung loose around his shoulders. His hat was sun-bleached and battered by years of quiet solitude. He hadn't trained horses in decades, but as Thunder Ray met Clifford's gaze, Jethro felt an old chill race down his spine. He'd seen that look before, once long ago, under storm-filled skies, moments before everything shattered. Clifford stepped back awkwardly, chuckling with forced bravado. "What, y'all never seen a little discipline before?" Nobody laughed with him. Instead, whispers rose slowly, uncertainly. Winona narrowed her eyes, uneasy. The stallion took a single, measured step forward, just one. But that one step spoke volumes. Jethro's breath caught in his chest. Memories pressed painfully against his heart. A storm, a scream, hooves thundering through darkness. He closed his eyes, briefly overwhelmed. When he reopened them, Thunder Ray's gaze had shifted, now locked unmistakably on him. Recognition burned between man and beast, deeper than logic, sharper than memory. Something long buried stirred within Jethro, something he'd spent decades trying to silence. Clifford's laughter faded. He glanced nervously at the crowd, sensing the shift. But Jethro didn't notice the billionaire anymore. His world had narrowed to Thunder Ray, standing calm and powerful in the heart of the arena. Jethro swallowed hard, suddenly aware that this wasn't just an auction, this was a reckoning. Winona Hale stood at the edge of the holding pen, arms crossed tight across her chest. Thunder Ray wasn't pacing like a nervous horse should. He wasn't agitated. He wasn't angry. He was still, watchful, too still, too aware. His ears didn't twitch at the hum of generators. His eyes didn't dart at distant voices. No, he wasn't spooked. He was calculating. That alone unsettled her, more than any buck or snort would have. Back in the shadows, Jethro Kane sat on an overturned feed bucket outside the stables, staring at the dirt like it might hold answers. His coffee had gone cold in his hand. He hadn't touched it, not since Thunder Ray turned and stared at him with those eyes. Those damn eyes. He tried to shake the feeling off, tell himself it was just coincidence, but memory was a cruel thing. It had a way of dragging the dead back into the daylight. He remembered the fire, the smoke, the flames, the frantic sound of hooves slamming against burning wood, Cassidy's scream, the way her body twisted to shield the stall door, and then silence. They told him she was gone. that nothing survived. Not her, not the unborn foal she carried. Only charred timber and ash. But Thunder Ray's stare wasn't the stare of a stranger. It was something else. It reached into the parts of Jethro he'd buried 22 years ago. Alden Maris watched from a distance, leaning against his truck, one hand shoved deep into his pocket. He hadn't spoken to Jethro since before the fire, since they argued in a thunderstorm and walked away from each other for good. He'd never meant to keep the secret this long. At first it had felt like protection, then over time it just became a burden with no good moment to release. But when he saw Thunder Ray in the arena, moving like he remembered Cassidy used to, when he saw the way the stallion held himself, the set of his jaw, the power in restraint, something inside Alden cracked. That wasn't just muscle and blood, that was legacy, and he knew it. He pulled a crumpled folder from the glove box, breeding papers, incomplete records, blank spots in the damn line, convenient holes no one had bothered to fill, but he had filled them, quietly, privately. A favor to a contact in Oklahoma, 2 decades ago. Hide the colt, protect the line, keep the past buried. But now the past had 4 legs, a burning stare, and a presence that couldn't be ignored. Inside the stables, Winona gently touched Thunder Ray's flank. He didn't flinch. He turned slightly, just enough to meet her eyes, and in that quiet exchange, her breath hitched, because she'd worked with hundreds of horses, trained champions, managed legends. But this one, he wasn't just different, he knew. The paper felt too light in Jethro's hands for the weight it carried. He unfolded it slowly, the brittle corners crinkling as his calloused fingers traced the lines. Thunder Ray's registration file, faxed from a contact Winona had tracked down through the auction board. At first glance it looked ordinary: breed, age, origin. But halfway down the page, under sire, 2 words blinked like a curse from the past: Whispering Ember. Jethro stopped breathing. That name wasn't supposed to exist. It had been an idea once, a dream, a hope, born in the last months before the fire. Cassidy's foal, he was going to call him that. Whispering Ember. It had felt right, soft, strong, something that carried Cassidy's fire without burning. They told him the foal had died in the blaze. No survivors, they said. But now, staring at that name in clean black ink, Jethro felt the bottom drop out of everything he thought he knew. His legs faltered. He sank onto a bench, the paper trembling between his fingers. Across the lot, Winona paced in the tack room, the air thick with dust and tension. She had pulled every document she could get her hands on. Thunder Ray's lineage was full of gaps, missing dams, absent breeding locations, transactions made through shell buyers and fake farms. It was too clean to be sloppy, too vague to be innocent. You were hidden on purpose, she whispered, placing a hand flat on the desk. Her eyes flicked to a photo tacked on the wall. Jethro and Cassidy years ago, standing proud beside a corral. She looked back down at the file. But why? 100 yards away, Alden Maris sat in his truck, staring at a sealed manila envelope on the passenger seat. Inside was everything. Old photos, scribbled notes from the vet who patched up the foal after the fire, a single DNA swab sealed tight since that day. He should have told Jethro years ago, should have been man enough to admit what he'd done, but he hadn't. Not when Jethro was breaking, not when the silence grew between them like barbed wire. He'd been angry then, jealous, watching Jethro rise, watching Cassidy choose him, watching their names etched into trophies while he stood on the sidelines. So when the fire came, and fate handed him a secret wrapped in ash and survival, he held onto it. Not for the colt, for himself. Now the lie was breathing. Jethro stepped out of the barn, the registration paper clutched tight in his fist. Thunder Ray stood beneath the awning, head low, eyes steady, as if he knew, as if he'd been waiting. Jethro looked at him, voice cracking under the strain of memory. Whispering Ember, he said aloud. The stallion lifted his head, and something deep inside Jethro shattered. The barn was quiet, except for the soft creak of wood and the distant rustle of wind through the arena fence. Jethro stood just inside the open door, the registration papers still in his hand, edges damp from sweat. Behind him, Thunder Ray shifted in his stall, calm but alert, as if he too was waiting. Alden stepped in, boots slow against the concrete. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, hat in hand, eyes sunken from too many sleepless nights. "You knew," Jethro said quietly, not turning. Alden's jaw clenched. "I did. For how long? Since the fire." Jethro turned then, slow, deliberate. His face wasn't angered, it was hollow. "You let me bury her, and him. You let me believe they were both gone. Alden looked down. I didn't plan it like that. I went back the next morning. Barn was still smoking. I heard movement, found him under a beam, barely alive, couldn't walk away. So you hid him, Jethro said flatly. From me. I didn't think you could take it. Alden said, voice cracking. You weren't eating. You weren't sleeping. You were broken, Jeth. I was angry too. I didn't know what to do, so I kept him safe, quiet, far away. You don't get to call that protection, Jethro snapped, stepping forward. You robbed me of the one thing that might have saved me. Alden looked him in the eye, guilt bleeding through every word. I was wrong. I know that now. The silence between them felt thick, pulsing with years of grief, betrayal, and missed chances. From the office, Winona stepped into the doorway, breaking the tension with urgency. You two can hate each other later. Right now we've got a problem. They both turned. Clifford's trying to file a possession claim through the auction board. Says Jethro interfered with a legal transfer of property. She tossed a folder onto the table. If he pushes this through before we can prove Thunder Ray's real bloodline, he could take him. Jethro's hands tightened into fists. He's not property, he growled. Then we need proof, Winona said. Not just paperwork. DNA. Alden stepped back, then slowly reached into his coat and pulled out the sealed envelope he'd carried for decades. I have Cassidy's swab from before the fire, and Thunder Ray's, Winona asked. I can get it. Alden nodded. Today. Jethro looked at him, expression unreadable. Why now? Because it's time, Alden said softly. I was wrong to keep him from you. But I won't let Clifford take him. They locked eyes, grudging allies in the face of something bigger than their history. Then let's end this, Jethro muttered. In the corner, Thunder Ray turned his head slightly, watching, listening, and waiting for the truth to finally rise. The black SUV rolled into the Sweetwater lot, like a storm cloud on wheels, windows tinted, chrome gleaming, arrogance thick in the air. Clifford Kennedy stepped out first, flanked by two men in tailored suits who looked more Wall Street than ranch hand. In his hand, a stack of crisp legal papers. In his eyes, the smugness of a man who'd never heard the word no. I'm here to collect what's mine, he barked, loud enough for the nearby handlers and buyers to turn their heads. Winona was already moving, phone in hand. He's filing a claim. Said you interfered with the auction's lawful transfer, she hissed to Jethro. Jethro didn't flinch. He just stepped out from the barn, slow and steady, with Thunder Ray walking calmly behind him. No rope, no reins, just presence. The stallion's hooves struck the dirt with quiet purpose. Clifford scoffed when he saw them. What is this? A parade? He held out the papers like a warrant. This horse was registered in my name at the time of sale. You've got no claim. You're trespassing on property I legally own. Jethro said nothing at first. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a single envelope, worn, sealed, and thick with consequence. He handed it to Winona, who stepped forward. DNA results, she said. Thunder Ray is the son of Cassidy, the mare lost in the 2003 stable fire. Registered or not, his bloodline links directly to Jethro Kane. That makes him not just a horse, but a legacy. Clifford's smirk faltered. Legacy doesn't hold in court. It holds out here, came a voice from the crowd. Heads were turning now. Buyers, trainers, ranch hands. The same people who had witnessed Clifford's slap, who had seen the stare that followed. The shift, the silence. Clifford rolled his eyes. This is ridiculous. You're all buying into some cowboy fairy tale. Then Thunder Ray moved. One step, then another, deliberate, unforced. He closed the distance between himself and Jethro, stopping just beside the old man's shoulder. Then, with the quiet grace of something ancient, he lowered his head, not submissively, but knowingly, like a knight offering allegiance. The crowd held its breath. Clifford stood frozen, mouth half open. His lawyers exchanged glances. He just chose. Someone whispered. A few phones came up. Cameras clicked. The moment was no longer rumor. It was record. Jethro placed a trembling hand on Thunder Ray's neck, feeling the warmth, the weight, the the truth of it all. You don't own him, he said softly, eyes locked on Clifford. Because you can't own loyalty. And in that still, wordless exchange between man and horse, the auction yard rendered its verdict, not through law, through legacy. The papers were never signed. Clifford's lawyers packed them up in silence, avoiding eye contact with the crowd that now watched with a quiet kind of reverence, not for the billionaire, but for the man he had tried to bulldoze. Clifford muttered something about appeals and nonsense, but no one listened. His power had always been noise, but this moment belonged to something quieter, older, truer. Jethro stood beside Thunder Ray, hand resting on the stallion's broad neck. The horse didn't move. He just stood there, like a monument, like he'd always belonged in that spot. People didn't approach. They just watched, and nodded. The kind of nod that meant respect, the kind of nod Jethro hadn't seen in years. Later, as the sun began its slow descent over Sweetwater, painting everything in soft gold, Jethro sat on a wooden bench near the fence. The barn lights hummed behind him. Thunder Ray grazed just a few feet away, his tail swaying in lazy arcs. Peaceful. Present. Alden Morris walked up slow, 2 cups of black coffee in hand. He offered one. Jethro hesitated, then took it. They sat in silence for a long while. I never meant to ruin you, Alden said quietly, eyes on the horizon. Jethro sipped. You didn't. Alden looked over, surprised. I did that myself. Jethro continued. You just helped me carry the weight. Alden swallowed hard. Still, I should have told you. You did. Eventually. And that was it. No grand apology, no lecture, just a quiet offering of something heavier than forgiveness, understanding. Behind them, Winona leaned against the barn wall, arms crossed and eyes soft. She had seen men break before, but rarely had she seen one rebuild. Slowly, painfully, one breath at a time. Jethro Kane wasn't who he used to be. He was something better, something forged. In town, folks had already begun to talk, not in gossip, but in story, about how a forgotten trainer reclaimed a bloodline from the ashes, about a horse who stared down a billionaire and chose a broken man instead, and most of all, about the way healing sometimes looked like a second chance, with 4 legs and fire in its eyes. Thunder Ray was no longer just a stallion. He was a symbol, not of victory, but of redemption. Jethro stood and walked toward the gate, Thunder Ray lifting his head to follow. The air was lighter now, like a storm had passed and left something cleaner in its wake. I lost everything once, Jethro murmured, brushing his hand along Thunder Ray's neck, but I didn't lose you. And for the first time in over 2 decades, he didn't just feel less broken, he felt whole. The old gate creaked open like a memory that had waited too long to speak. Jethro stepped out of the truck, boots crunching against gravel grown soft with time. The ranch hadn't seen life in over a decade. The house sagged under years of wind and silence, paint peeled, fences leaning, but the land, it remembered. The air smelled the same, earthy, sharp, clean, like rain just passed, and something sacred was about to return. He opened the trailer door. Thunder Ray stood tall, ears forward, nostrils flaring as he took in the air. He didn't hesitate. He stepped down slow, deliberate, each hoof pressing into the soil, like he knew it, like it knew him. Alden arrived an hour later, truck bed loaded with supplies. Winona followed behind in her dusty old SUV. No one said much. They didn't need to. The barn creaked as they pushed open the doors, dust spinning in the sunlight like ghosts. They got to work, clearing, repairing, brushing away time with every nail, every stroke, every laugh shared between people once splintered by the past. By afternoon, the pasture was open. Jethro unlatched the gate. Thunder Ray didn't bolt. He walked, slow, calm, eyes scanning the horizon like he was reading a forgotten map. Then he moved. Smooth, powerful, a gallop that wasn't wild but free, as if the earth itself rose to meet each stride, as if Cassidy was still out there, watching from the far fence line. Jethro stood at the edge, arms resting on the gate, heart wide open. He remembered the first time he brought Cassidy to this field, how she kicked up her heels and danced in the wind, how he thought she'd live forever, how wrong he was, and yet, maybe not. Alden stood beside him, quiet, Winona wiped her eyes on her sleeve, pretending it was the dust. None of them spoke. Words couldn't carry the weight of what was unfolding. Thunder Ray circled back, slowing to a trot, then a walk. He came right up to Jethro, stopped just inches away, and lowered his head gently, just like his mother used to. Jethro reached out, resting his forehead against the stallion's. "I'm sorry I wasn't there," he whispered, "but I'm here now." The wind rustled the tall grass, a hawk cried overhead, and somewhere in the deep quiet of his bones, Jethro felt Cassidy again, not as pain, but as presence. Some bonds don't vanish, they wait. And beneath the open Texas sky, with old friends beside him and legacy at his side, Jethro finally came home, not just to a ranch but to himself. If this story moved you, if you felt the power of redemption, the weight of legacy, and the quiet strength of second chances, don't just scroll past. Subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories that honor the bonds between man, memory, and the animals that help us heal. Share your thoughts in the comments, and tell us, have you ever felt a connection that refused to be broken because some stories aren't just told, they're felt?